On this short video, I want to discuss the authorship of Rashi, or what's printed in the name of Rashi, on Tractate Taanit, the Talmudic tractate that deals with fasting. Now, it's known not every time we have Rashi, attributed to Rashi commentary, that it's really written by Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest commentator of the both written Torah and the oral Torah, which is the Babylonian Talmud. Both commentaries of Rashi to the written Torah and to the Babylonian Talmud are incredibly important. They are learned more than any other commentary. And as I mentioned on the previous short lesson about Ibn Ezra, that not everything that's attributed to Ibn Ezra is, of course, came from his pen. So I wanted to give an example how Maharatz Chayes, there was a person less than 200, I think, years ago. Maybe, actually, part of his life was more than 200 years ago. He was one of the great sages who was also a scholar of Hakira, of perhaps more scientific type, which is not very common. Rav Hutner's daughter, at some point in her life, did a doctoral study on this individual. Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Chayes or Hadjes or Chiyus, all kinds of Hayut, there are all kinds of pronunciation of his last name. It's written in Hebrew, Het Yud Vav Tav. His notes on the Talmud are printed in all the standard editions of the Talmud in the back where the Achronim are printed. His notes, which are often very interesting and deal sometimes with geography, history, and all kinds of interesting things. Hakira of the oral law in general. And also he wrote a bunch of other books and also Shelot V'Tshuvot, questions and answers. And I want to discuss how he deals with Rashi on Tractate Taanit and why he believed that this is not real Rashi. Now, other tractates, by the way, where we probably do not have Rashi, or at least there's a big question if the commentary that's printed there is truly Rashi, are Meila, possibly Horayot, maybe parts of Kritot, Nedarim and Nazir. This every yeshiva student knows that when you learn those two tractates, Nazir and Nedarim, they're not learned with what's called Rashi. It's probably not Rashi, but instead a different commentator is chosen. Usually in yeshivas they learn Ran for tractate Nedarim and Tosafot or Rosh for tractate Nazir. And also, of course, Tractate Taanit doesn't have Rashi. That's very clear that the commentator on Tractate Taanit is not Rashi. So now I want to discuss, and Moed Katan, by the way, also very likely the commentator to Moed Katan is not Rashi. And now I want to discuss the so-called Rashi to Tractate Taanit specifically. By the way, I'm not, of course, a scholar of note or of any kind, but I must say that the first time I learned Taanit and Rashi on it, I also felt something weird about it. I couldn't exactly place my hand on it, but I definitely felt that something is unusual about this commentary. So these are some of the proofs that Maharatz Chayes, Chiyus, is bringing. This is in his Responsa called Imrei Bina, the fifth question. So first he brings various contradictions between Rashi in other places and Rashi on Tractate Taanit. One of them even has a known halachic corollary. There's an afkamina in halacha. Do you know if it's prohibited to do work on the night of Tisha B'Av? We don't do work during the day. Ashkenazim don't do till midday. Some Sephardim keep the whole day. And by work, I don't mean like Shabbat. Of course, Tisha B'Av is not like Shabbat. You're allowed to ride a car or turn on the light. I'm talking about work more like Chol HaMoed type of work, meaning a person shouldn't do his business, go about his business on the 9th of Av, the saddest day of our year when we all mourn for the destruction of the temple. So clearly, during the daytime, the law applies, but like I said, Ashkenazim only keep it till the midday. But what about the nighttime? So it turns out there is actually a contradiction between Rashi and Psachim, which seems to be clearly forbidden, and the so-called Rashi on Taanit that seems to be allowed. This is discussed in various achronim, and Rav Yosef actually relies on Rashi and Taanit to be lenient for Sephardim. But the truth is, if Rashi is not the one who authored these words, then we can't really rely on some unknown authority that wrote commentary, maybe a student of Rashi or a student of a student. One possibility that Maharatz Chayes later offers is that there was some short commentary of Rashi on Taanit. Look, Tractate Taanit has a lot of Agada, and there is not so much halacha in it anyway, or at least applicable halacha. Could be for whatever reason Rashi wrote a very short commentary to it, the basic brochure of sorts, kuntras, and then based on it already the later students developed it into a full commentary. But we're discussing the commentary as it is in front of us, the printed commentary in all standard editions of the Talmud. So that commentary, according to Maharatz Chayes, is not penned by Rashi in its final form, at least. Another interesting idea that Rashi, so-called Rashi on Taanit, brings, that he uses Aramaic translation of Psalms. But in other places it seems that Rashi didn't have, in fact, in his commentary on Psalms or anywhere else, he does not bring any Aramaic translation on Ktuvim. Aramaic translation to Nevi'im, of course, Targum Yonatan is very well quoted by Rashi, constantly. Just like Targum Onkelos is quoted by him constantly in his commentary on the 5 books of Moshe. But on Ktuvim, Rashi specifically says in Megillah there is no translation there. And whatever translation exists today in the printed editions, it was never a kind of authoritative translation. That's why almost nobody quotes it and almost nobody studies it. Another interesting thing that Maharatz Chayes noticed is that Tosafot in this tractate a lot of times seems to be explaining exactly the same thing as what Rashi says. So if they had in front of them our version of Rashi, why would they repeat the same thing? And Bichlal, altogether, it seems like a lot of times they're not doing the usual pilpul, but seem to be explaining the simple meaning of the wordings. Why would that be? Usually Tosafot are addition, that's why I call Tosafot, it's an addition to Rashi. But here they seem to be doing something similar to what they're doing in tractates Nedarim and Nazir, exactly for the same reason as I mentioned, that the commentary there is not Rashi, so they didn't have any commentary, and therefore they wrote the basic commentary. Rashi is always the first, the basic commentary that explains the simple meaning of the Gemara, and Tosafot makes additional pilpulim and certain questions of practical halacha sometimes, but they almost never follow this type of simple explanation of the simple pshat of the Gemara, unless they argue with Rashi. Moreover, sometimes in this tractate, as Maharatz Chayes brings examples of this, the Tosafot actually ask a question which, if you read the Rashi's commentary, you'll see the answer to this question. And they ignore completely his answer and ask their own question. Again, if they had the same as our Rashi's commentary in front of them, why would they pose a question which is already answered in Rashi's commentary? And altogether, it seems like when they're quoting Rashi, it's not taken from our commentary attributed to Rashi. Now, next, Maharatz Chayes notices that the commentator that's attributed to Rashi here seems to be using much longer sentences and much more convoluted explanations. That's very unusual for Rashi. One of the great advantages and why everybody learns Rashi is that both on the Chumash and on the Tanakh and on the Gemara, Rashi is very short. He's very precise. Every word is weighted. He doesn't just keep explaining with long sentences, with going through the same thing. And that's completely not like the commentator that's attributed to Rashi here. For example, he often would quote a whole verse, something he doesn't do usually in his commentaries to the other tractates. And altogether, some of his comments here are quite confusing. He seems to be offering several opinions. A number of times he just says gim gum, kind of stammering. Right? He's saying in the end, it's a gim gum, not clear at all. That's very unusual for Rashi. And in one place, he completely leads to total confusion. Moreover, in this commentary attributed to Rashi, very often he says, Mifi Mori, Mifi Rebbe. I'm saying this in the name of my Rebbe or in the name of my... Mori and Rebbe is almost synonymous, Rebbe or teacher, Mori. So while Rashi does quote his Rebbeim very rarely, but he does. In a few tractates, he does quote some opinion of his Rebbeim. But the number of times he uses these expressions in this tractate is simply way more than anywhere else. So it seems like the commentator wrote based on Rashi, maybe a student of Rashi, but it's not truly Rashi's commentary. And that's what Maharatz Chayes concludes. And the reason I decided to make this short video is because of, as I mentioned, the previous lesson where I discussed the two commentaries of Ibn Ezra to the book of Shemot. And this is another example of what they call scientific method, how they try to figure out who does a specific commentary belong to and which ones were mislabeled and misattributed. And if you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.